Hotel World. This your brother Matthew Daniels, aka Ampu, aka The Chosen Few, aka the real bookworm. I'm not a bookworm, I'm the real bookworm. Make sure you get it right. And as always, world, may your name live on forever, and may your memory never die. Hotel, cheers to that. Some of the greatest novels, stories, epics of all time come directly out of ancient Kemet. So today I'm going to be telling you guys a story about the Nubian Sorcerer. Okay, now this comes out of my book, Ancient Egyptian Literature by Miriam Litcham, right? The translation is done by Miriam Litcham, and this is volume 3. Now, this I cannot read every single portion of it because it is quite extensive. It'll take more time than I actually have because it is an actual full story, right? It is a novel, a book. But what I will do, I'm going to tell you guys the story, and I may read a few tidbits here and there just so you can hear it in the words of the ancient Egyptians. But this is by far one of my favorite stories, right? One of my favorite stories that came out of ancient Egypt. So the Nubian Sorcerer, this is how it begins. After these things, it happened one day that Pharaoh Ursher went to the court of the palace of Memphis, and the council of nobles, generals, and grandees of Egypt stood in their ranks in the court. Then one came to announce, "There is a communication being made by a chieftain of Nubia, which is bound to his body in a document." When he had been announced before Pharaoh, he was brought to the court. He saluted and said, "Is there anyone who will read this document that I have brought to Egypt before Pharaoh without breaking its seal? One who will read the writing that is in it written without opening it. If there is no good scribe and learned man in Egypt who can read it without opening it, I shall take the shame of Egypt to the land of Nubia, my country." Now, what you have to understand now, there were various times in the ancient Egyptian empire when the Egyptians and the Nubians had bad blood. They were going head to head. They had battles and they had wars. There were also times when certain Nubians were allies of the Egyptians. But what this story is highlighting is one of those confrontational Nubians. So what the document is describing is there came a time under a pharaoh that they're calling Ursher, right, where he was holding court and he had all of his scribes, his officials, his powerful people of his court, his administrators of his court. They were all in the major court of Pharaoh, and they announced that a Nubian had come from the land of Nubia and had come to the court of Pharaoh. And so when they announced the Nubian sorcerer, no doubt, the Nubian sorcerer comes in and he has a book, right? He has a book strapped to his body, tied down to his body. And so what they would do a lot of times is they would have contests to see who had the most powerful magicians, who had the most powerful scribes, who had the most powerful spells. Was it the Egyptians or was it the Nubians? So this Nubian sorcerer came in with a document, with a book strapped to his body, and he made a declaration. He said, "Is there any powerful scribe, sorcerer, magician in all the land of Egypt that can tell me what is written on this book, that is written in this document, without breaking the seal and opening it?" So he posed a challenge, and he said, "If there is no one great enough in the land of Egypt to read this document without opening it, may shame be upon Egypt, and I'm going to take that shame back to the land of Nubia and let my people know that there are no great sorcerers, scribes, magicians in the land of Egypt." Okay, so Pharaoh was very perplexed, right? His people were very perplexed. They were wondering, how can anyone tell you what's on that document without breaking the seal and reading it? So Pharaoh told him, "All right, look, we're going to give you somewhere to stay in the court, right? Somewhere around the palace. We're going to feed you. We're going to be very hospitable with you. Give me time to consult my my scribes, my magicians, my sorcerers, and let's try to find someone who can complete the task. So the Nubian Sorcerer was like, okay, bet. They put him up in one of the rooms. They gathered together all of the learned men of the Egyptians, right? All of the learned men, all of the scribes, all of the magicians, all of the sorcerers, all of the administrators, all of the great thinkers, right? The geniuses. And no one could figure out how to do it. They were basically telling Pharaoh that, man, look, this cannot be done. So what happened was one of Pharaoh's learned men, he went home and he was telling this story to his wife. And so when he was telling the story to his wife, his son, right? His son heard him. You know, his son was a special boy. And he was talked about in several other epics, several other novels. And so his son was special. And so when his son overheard the conversation, he said, Father, take me to the court of Pharaoh. I can read the document without opening it. And so his father was like, hey, are you sure? I don't want to take you in there and then you're not able to do it and you bring shame. You bring shame on the whole land of Egypt, right? And so the son tells him, Father, I need you to just trust me. You already know some of the things that I'm capable of from some of the previous novels, right? You already know what I'm capable of, right? Because this was a special boy. Take me. I can do it. Trust me. So the father trusted his son, right? He take his son, Saul, he take him in there. So they convene with court again. The Nubian comes out with the book strapped to himself. He presents his challenge, and then the son, he comes out and he says, I can complete the task. So Pharaoh was like, okay, what's on it? And so the boy, he says, okay, I'm about to tell you what's written on the document. But first I want you to give your word that if I answer correctly, you're going to be an honest and honorable man and admit to what's on the document. And so the Nubian Sorcerer says that he will admit to what's on the document. So I'm going to read a small little part, and then I'm just going to start explaining the story to you guys again. Here began the stories that Sorcerer related before Pharaoh and his nobles, with the people of Egypt listening to his voice. He said, what is written in the letter of the chieftain of Nubia, who stands here in the center, is the following. It came to pass one day in the time of Pharaoh Menk-Pre-Seamun, who was beneficent king of the whole land with Egypt, overflowing with all good things in his time, for he was generous in giving expenditure and work in the great temples of Egypt. That day it happened that the ruler of the land of Nubia was resting in a pavilion in the woodlands of Amun when he heard the voices of 3 chieftains of Nubia in the background. So as he begins to relate what's on the document, he says that the document begins talking about a time further in the past than when this event was taking place under the reign of a particular Pharaoh, Seamun, right? And he says that the document basically tells the story that during the reign of this Egyptian Pharaoh, there was a king in Nubia, right? And so this king in Nubia was in Nubia, and he was in his pavilion, he was in his royal place, and he was relaxing and reclining. And he overheard a conversation made by 3 Nubian sorcerers, okay? So one Nubian sorcerer made the remark. He said, if it weren't for the great god Amun-Ra, and if I wasn't so afraid of the great god Amun-Ra, I would, he say, were it not that Amun would find fault with me, and the Lord of Egypt might punish me, I would cast my sorceries upon Egypt and would make the people of Egypt spend 3 days and 3 nights seeing no light or darkness. So he was saying, you know what? If it wasn't for Amun-Ra, and if I wasn't afraid of Amun-Ra, and if I wasn't afraid of the king of Egypt punishing me, I would use my sorceries to cast the whole land of Egypt into utter darkness for 3 days and 3 nights, right? And so then the next Nubian sorcerer says, another of them said, among other things, were it not that Amun might accuse me and the Lord of Egypt might punish me, I would cast my sorceries upon Egypt and would have Pharaoh brought from Egypt to the land of Nubia and would have him beaten with 500 blows of the stick in public before the ruler and would have him return to Egypt all within 6 hours. So the next Nubian sorcerer says, you know what? If I wasn't so afraid of the great God Amun-Ra, and if I wasn't afraid that the king of Egypt will punish me, I would use my sorcery. I would use my sorceries, right, to kidnap the Pharaoh himself in Egypt, bring his behind to the land of Nubia. I would have him beaten with 500 stripes before the ruler of Nubia, and then I would have him taken back to the land of Egypt all within 6 hours. Right? So it's like he trying to outdo the other one. You will cast him in the darkness. I'll bring the Pharaoh here and beat him. These guys crazy. And so he says, the third said, were it not that Amun might accuse me and the Lord of Egypt might punish me, I would cast my sorceries upon Egypt and would cause the land to be barren for 3 years. So the third guy say, you know what? If I wasn't so afraid of Amun-Ra, if I wasn't afraid that the king of Egypt will punish me, I would use my sorceries to make the whole land of Egypt barren for 3 years. And I would cast them into famine, right? I would cast them into famine for 3 years. So one guy said he'll cast him in the darkness. One guy said he'll bring Pharaoh and he'll beat him in front of the ruler of Nubia. And the other one said that he would use his magic to make the land barren for like 3 years. So the ruler of Nubia, he overhears these conversations. So he goes in there with it at. And he say, hey, wait a minute. I've been hearing y'all conversation. Which one of you three said that you could use your sorceries to bring the Pharaoh of Egypt here, beat him with 500 stripes in front of my face, and then send him back to Egypt within 6 hours? And so the sorcerer, the Nubian sorcerer that said it, he was like, it was me, O king, right? It was me, O king. I said it. So the king told him, hey, look, if you could do that, you gonna do it. Hey, I ain't worried about none of that. Do it. And so he whips up his magic, right? He whips up his magic, and how the story describes it is he basically like creates some creatures in a sky boat, okay? And so he brings these creatures to life, these wax creatures to life in this sky boat. He brings it to life and it flies, right? Some type of sky boat with creatures in it, flies to Egypt one night, and he snatches up the Pharaoh of Kemet, right, out of his bed, snatches him up, abducts him, not aliens, but abducts him, kidnaps him, takes him back to the land of Nubia, presents him before the ruler of Nubia, beat him. They beat the Pharaoh with 500 stripes, and then they take him back within 6 hours. And so Pharaoh, he wakes up and he's like, oh man, what the hell just happened? Was that a dream? And they look at him, he really is beat. He calls all his mighty men to him and he tells them what happened. And they was like, hey, Pharaoh, are you crazy? Well, you got abducted, you got kidnapped, something took you to the land of Egypt and beat you. I mean, took you to the land of Nubia, beat you and brought you back. So he shows them the whips on his back. So they see it, okay? And so they're like, oh man, this really happened. And so Pharaoh was like, hey man, look, if y'all need to be able to protect me from the sorceries of these Nubians, do something or else off with all y'all heads. So they come together and they make a magic amulet, right? They make a magic amulet that will protect him from the magic and the sorceries of the Nubians. So the next night comes, the Nubian sorcerer tries to send these creatures in this sky boat to get the Pharaoh again, but his amulet and the magic within it protects him and they can't get him. And so they go back to Nubia empty-handed, right? And so then what Pharaoh does, he gets his sorcerers and magicians, he gets them to create some creatures and create a sky boat, bring it to life. It flies to the land of Nubia, right? Flies to the land of Nubia, kidnaps the Nubian ruler, brings him back to Egypt, beats him in front of Pharaoh, beats him with 500 stripes and sends him back to the land of Nubia. So then when he gets back to the land of Nubia, he like, oh man, y'all gotta protect me. Y'all beat me here. They beat me. And so they try to create something that will protect him from the magic of the Egyptians. So the next night, the Egyptians send the creatures in the sky boat to the land of Nubia again, right? So when they get there, the magic tries to repel the Egyptian magic, but the Egyptian magic is much stronger. So they take up the Nubian the Nubian chieftain again, bring him to the land of Egypt, beat him with 500 stripes, okay? Sends him back to the land of Nubia. When he gets back to the land of Nubia, he's like, oh man, you've been disgraced. Your magic couldn't protect me. You've been disgraced. So the sorcerer who was involved in all of this, he was like, man, I got to redeem myself. I have to go to the land of Egypt and I have to challenge these sorcerers face to face. I have to redeem myself and I have to redeem Nubia. His mother told him, no, if you go down to Egypt, they're going to kill you. And he was like, hey, if they kill me, they got to kill me. But I have to go. I have to redeem myself. So he tells his mother, look, I'm going to use my magic, right? And so if I get into a situation where I'm about to be killed and die, these things are going to happen so you will know. And so she was like, okay, bet. So the sorcerer goes to the land of Egypt. He confronts the Pharaoh and his sorcerers in their court, and there's this big magical battle, right? He uses his sorcery to try to attack. They use their sorcery to deflect, and they try to use their sorcery to attack back. And he used his sorcery, and it's like this big magical battle between the Nubian sorcerer and the Egyptian magicians, right? And so ultimately, the Egyptian magicians, they were more powerful than the Nubian sorcerer, so they overcome, they win. And so they get him down, and they're about to kill him, okay? They're about to kill him. And so when all of this is taking place, the signs happened back in Nubia with his mother, and she realizes, oh my God, my son is about to die. So she uses her sorceries. She turns herself into a goose and she flies full speed to the land of Egypt. She gets there right when they're about to plunge the dagger into her son's heart. And she's like, oh no, Pharaoh, please spare my son. If you would only spare my son, we will leave. We'll go back to the land of Nubia and we'll never come back. And so they have him about to kill him. And so the sorcerers of Egypt and the Pharaoh, they like, all right, look, check this out. We'll let you leave, but you first have to swear an oath to us that you will never return to the land of Egypt. So the mother says, you have my word. I give you my oath. I will never return to the land of Egypt, right? And so they was like, all right, Nubian sorcerer, we need to hear from you or you're dead. So the Nubian sorcerer, he says, I will never return to Egypt within 1,500 years. Tries to be slick. He doesn't say that he'll never return. He says that he won't return within 1,500 years, but that is good enough. So they was like, all right, get the hell out of the land of Egypt. So they go back to Nubia, disgraced, right? And so what happens is, after he gets through telling the story, the boy who is telling the story about what's on the Nubian sorcerer's document, he says, now, is that what's on the document? The Nubian sorcerer has to admit that that's true. The document actually tells that story. And so the boy then reveals, he say, I know what's on that document because I was that sorcerer from 1,500 years ago that battled that Nubian sorcerer. And this guy is that Nubian sorcerer from 1,500 years ago. And then he goes into this amazing story about how he was in the afterworld, right? He obviously died. This 1,500 years has passed. He was in the afterworld. This Nubian sorcerer was in the afterworld, and he heard him making plans to use his magic to return to the land of Egypt now that the 1,500 years was up, and he was going to get his revenge on the land of Egypt. Because after that 1,500 years had passed, there were no powerful sorcerers like Saw the boy, who was the sorcerer in the past that had defeated him. There were no more powerful sorcerers in the land of Egypt, and he knew this. So he was like, I'm about to go back now that the 1,500 years are up, and I'm about to wreak havoc and get my revenge on the Egyptians. So in the afterlife, he heard this, and so he begged the great god Asar, let me go back to earth to defend the land of Egypt. So Asar told him, okay, I'll let you be reincarnated and born into a new body so that you could be there to defend the land of Egypt. And this is why in all of the previous novels about this kid seemed to have special powers, because for one, he was a reincarnated, powerful magic sorcerer from thousands of years ago in the ancient past. Right? And so when he says all this, I'm the great sorcerer that defeated this Nubian sorcerer. This is the Nubian sorcerer from 1,500 years ago, and he has come to wreak havoc on the land of Egypt. Right? And so then what he does is he uses his magic, right? The boy, he uses his magic. He creates a wall of fire. Ooh, he out of nowhere, he makes this fire come up. The fire surrounds the Nubian sorcerer, and burns him up, burns him to a crisp and kills him, right? Burns him to a crisp and he burns up, he dies. You know, and so after that happens, now the boy saw now that he has completed his ultimate goal in life, that he only came back to save the land of Egypt from this Nubian sorcerer who was coming back. And although he did all those wonderful things in these other novels leading up to this point, this is why he was here. Then he disappeared, right? He disappeared. And so everyone was like, oh, where did Saul go? You know, and he had disappeared. He had probably went back to the afterlife. Okay. And so his father was like, oh man, he was missing him. He was missing Saul. He was missing his son. So he went back home that night. He went to his wife, and it says that when he laid with his wife got pregnant, and she actually had a son, which was a beautiful thing, because in one of the previous stories about this boy, his father, right, a man named Setna, right, he wanted a child, his wife wanted a child, but they couldn't really conceive. So they had went to one of the temples of the god, and they had prayed and asked God, right, to grant them a child. Okay, and so they went to sleep, and you know, some magical stuff happened, and what happened was she ate this special fruit that had made her impregnated with Sar. That is how he came back. She ate this special fruit at this temple. And so when she got pregnant, they were like, oh, we've been blessed with a child. But they didn't realize that that child actually came from that fruit that she ate. And he was the reincarnated spirit of this ancient Egyptian sorcerer, magician, scribe. Okay, and so after he had completed his mission and he disappeared, they were allowed to actually have a child of their own. Powerful story, amazing story. I mean, it honestly, it had a little bit of everything. You know, you see the mother's love, you see the comedy, you see the magic, you see the sorcery, you see the battle. And like I tell you guys, there are a lot of ancient Egyptian stories that for content, they'll just blow your mind. They'll blow you away. You know, they'll blow you away. So that was the story of the Nubian sorcerer. Okay, so look, what I want you guys to do before I sign off, okay? What I want you guys to do, I want you guys to go to Amazon.com. I need you guys to support me. People are already supporting me. They're already buying the books, but we need more support. I want you guys to go to Amazon.com. Well, first, like, share, subscribe. Then go to Amazon.com, type in Big Game Hunting by Matthew Daniels. Big Game Hunting by Matthew Daniels. I need you to order my latest novel, right? All fact, no fiction, exposing police corruption right here in Tech City, Texas. Big Game Hunting by Matthew Daniels. You can get the paperback for $10. You can get the ebook version for $1.99. Show your support. Also, while you're on Amazon, you can get my novel Suicide Note. Type in Suicide Note by Matthew Daniels. Order that book. Or you can get my novel Thicker Than Water by Matthew Daniels. Thicker Than Water by Matthew Daniels. Order that book as well. All of my books are available in paperback. All of my books are available in ebook form. I would really appreciate it if everybody that sees this video at least go download the ebook version of one of my books. I would appreciate if you get all three, but at least get one. Show your support. So, Ancient Egyptian Literature, Volume 3 by Miriam Litcham, The Nubian Sorcerer. This your brother, Matthew Daniels, a.k.a. Ampu, a.k.a. The Chosen Few, a.k.a. The Real Bookworm. I'm not a bookworm, I'm the real bookworm. Make sure you get it right. And as always, world, may your name live on forever, and may your memory never die. Hotel, cheers to that. Peace, I'm out.